Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, they, she, he, and this is Literally Graphic. And today is a wrap-up review of the manga series Our Dreams at Dusk by Yuhki Kamatani. Link in the cards to my initial thoughts review for Volume 1 back in July of 2020. The series in its entirety is only 4 volumes long, and each volume was a pretty fast read. Originally published from 2015 to 2018, Seven Seas Entertainment published these English editions in 2019. Another big reason I should have just waited and done one review for the entire series. But sometimes I'm flying by the seats of my pants, wouldn't you know. Translated by Jocelyn Allen. This series is categorized as seinen, school life, contemporary, drama, and rated teen. One volume, or the series in total, was also nominated for the Best Manga Harvey Award in 2019. Content notes for homophobia, transphobia, slurs, outing, dead naming, cancer, death, and emotional explosions. What kinds of keywords came to mind reading this series? Fine lines, growing up, finding yourself, messing up, community, renovation, magical realism, and tradition. Stringing together some of the synopses, quote, the story follows Tasuku Kaname, a gay teen who meets other LGBT people at a discussion lounge after being involuntarily outed. Tasuku is starting to feel at home at the drop-in center, just in time for him to help a young student who's also hanging out there. When Tasuku attends a workshop organized by Cat Clutter, the last person he is expecting to see there shows up. Meanwhile, Saki's biggest secret is thrust out in the open, despite her desperate attempts to keep it under wraps. End quote. A series of slice-of-life vignettes, we follow Tasuku through a series of events where he gets to know other people who attend a local drop-in for LGBTQ+ people. A very smooth, flowing story. While the community at the drop-in does cover many facets of the queer community, it didn't come across, to me, as didactic in the least. I guess there's a bit of a baseline knowledge, or suspension of knowing, that is expected of the reader, although some of the side characters are certainly at a very introductory knowledge level when it comes to queer identities, not to mention the outright bullying that does come up a few times. It does end up feeling like a book for queer people instead of just being about queer people. There's certainly room for both, but I feel like I end up reviewing a lot more of the latter rather than the former. Other pluses to the series for me were how diverse the ages were and how unfinished most of the characters' identities still felt. I guess that could sound like a bad thing, but most of us don't know ourselves 100% and will never change, and so this natural development and self-discovery was really refreshingly honest, particularly with younger people, and certainly was another element that steered the story far away from becoming didactic. Tasuku's relationship with each of the characters is not built off of an info dump about someone's identity, but rather walking alongside them through often difficult transitions. Sometimes this means things get messy, and sometimes Tasuku clearly messes up. But I feel like this again is an honest reflection of the lived reality of such a diverse, misunderstood, and marginalized community. There is some potentially triggering content in here though, so it's not a must-read for everyone. But for every intense moment, it did feel like Kamatani was pointing towards an obstinate hope for better. Visually, this series is also extremely pleasing. I would definitely recommend Donnie's video on the use of visual metaphors over on Lines in Motion. I certainly couldn't pretend that I had noticed a fraction of what they cover there. I mean, it's hard to miss that some sort of visual metaphor is going on, but I hadn't quite connected all the dots. In retrospect, it's pretty hard to unsee the influence of Moto Hagio. My only complaint is that I did get a few of the brunettes mixed up, and sometimes in my momentum, I read right through a transition. So I would suddenly realize I had no clue what I was reading and have to flip back a page or two. That could just as easily be my ADHD talking though. There's certainly no wasted space. Moving through the intersections, obviously there's a lot of gender and sexuality diversity, race is a monolith that isn't really reflected on, and class plus ability/disability are largely unimportant to the plot. I ended up rating volumes 1, 2, and 3 4 out of 5 stars. with the beautifully heart-wrenching Volume 4 rated 5 out of 5 stars. Bye y'all, keep reading An Organized and Capitalist Oppression. And Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, an Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.